Have you ever felt like you're trapped, not by physical walls, but by invisible chains in your mind? A grudge, a regret, or even a painful memory that won't let go of you no matter how hard you try. What if I told you these chains don't just weigh you down? They can become something darker, something that haunts you. Tonight, let me share a story about the chilling power of holding on and the incredible freedom that comes with learning the art of letting go. This is the tale of Kayan, a young monk, a cursed village, and a terrifying shadow that thrived on pain. Our story begins with Kayan, a monk who had spent years training in a quiet Zen monastery. He had learned to sit in stillness for hours, to tame the chatter of his mind, and to find peace in simplicity. Yet despite his training, Kayan felt there was something missing. His heart was restless, his spirit heavy with questions. One day his master summoned him. The old man's voice was gentle but firm. "Kayan, your training is not yet complete. You must leave the monastery and journey into the world. There is a village in need of your help. Go there, and you will learn what you seek." Kayan bowed deeply, though he didn't understand the meaning of his master's words. After days of travel, Kayan reached the village. It was surrounded by tall, ancient trees, their branches twisting like skeletal hands against the sky. The air was thick with mist, and an unnatural stillness hung over the place. The villagers were wary of Kayan. Their eyes darted nervously, and they spoke in hushed tones, as if afraid of being overheard. When Kayan asked what troubled them, they gave the same cryptic answer: the shadow. No one would explain further, but Kayan noticed something strange. Some villagers seemed hollow, their faces pale and their eyes void of life. It was as if they were already half dead, trapped in some unseen torment. That evening, as Kayan meditated near the village's edge, he saw her, a young woman walking alone, her figure illuminated by the faint glow of a lantern. Her shoulders were hunched, and her steps were heavy. Kayan approached her carefully. "Sister," he said softly, "are you troubled?" She turned to him, and Kayan was struck by her hollow eyes. She looked as though she had not slept in weeks. "It won't leave me," she whispered. Kayan frowned. "What won't leave you?" "The shadow," she replied, her voice trembling. "It follows me everywhere. It whispers to me, taunts me. I can't escape it." Kayan asked her to share her story, and reluctantly, she began to speak. Her name was Aiko, and she had been consumed by anger and grief. "My brother betrayed my family," she said bitterly. "He stole everything from us and left us to suffer. I've hated him every day since." Kayan listened in silence as her words poured out. "I tried to move on, but I couldn't," she continued. "And then it came. The shadow. It's always there, feeding on my pain. The more I think about my brother, the stronger it gets." Kayan nodded. He had heard of such things before, not physical creatures, but manifestations of the mind. The shadow was not an external force. It was the embodiment of her inability to let go. Kayan decided to help Aiko. Together they sat by the river, where the water flowed steadily, undisturbed by the rocks in its path. "Imagine your anger as a stone," Kayan said, picking up a small rock. "Hold it in your hand." Aiko hesitated, but then she picked up a stone and gripped it tightly. "Now imagine what it would feel like to drop it," Kayan continued. For a moment Aiko's grip loosened, and her face softened. But before she could release the stone, a chilling wind swept through the trees. The air grew colder, and a shadowy figure began to emerge from the darkness. Kayan stood, his heart pounding. The shadow was tall and formless, its body shifting like smoke. It moved toward Aiko, its tendrils reaching for her. "It knows I can't let go," Aiko whispered, tears streaming down her face. Kayan steadied his breath, his training kicking in. He realized that the shadow was feeding on her pain, growing stronger the more she clung to it. As Kayan faced the shadow, something unexpected happened. A memory surfaced, one he thought he had buried long ago. He saw the face of a fellow monk who had betrayed his trust, a wound that had never fully healed. The shadow turned toward him, as if sensing his own unresolved anger. Kayan froze, realizing he too was not free from the chains of the past. For the first time in his life, Kayan felt fear. The shadow was not just Aiko's demon, it was his own. Kayan knew what had to be done. Turning to Aiko, he said, "We must let go together." He closed his eyes and began to chant softly, a prayer of release. Like the river flows, let the past drift away. Like the wind passes, let the pain be carried far. Aiko joined him, her voice trembling at first, but growing steadier with each word. They both picked up their stones, their symbols of pain, and held them tightly one last time. "Now," Kian said, "release it." With a deep breath, they threw the stones into the river. The shadow let out an ear-piercing scream, its form dissolving into the night. The air grew still, and a profound silence settled over the forest. For the first time in years, Aiko felt a weight lift from her heart. The anger she had carried for so long no longer held power over her. Kian too felt a shift within himself. The memory of his betrayal no longer burned. It was like a leaf carried downstream, no longer tethered to him. Before leaving the village, Kian gathered the villagers and shared the lesson he had learned. Holding on to pain is like gripping a burning coal. It only harms you. Letting go is not forgetting. It is freeing yourself to live fully in the present. The villagers began to practice his teachings, and over time the curse of the shadow faded from their land. And now, the question turns to you. What are you holding on to that no longer serves you? Is it anger, regret, fear, or guilt? Picture it as a stone in your hand. Feel its weight, its sharp edges. Now imagine how light you would feel if you simply let it go. The art of letting go is not easy, but it is the key to inner peace. Like Kian and Aiko, you have the power to release the shadows that haunt you. The river is waiting. Are you ready to cast your stone? Let go and find freedom.